Christians. It often comes up by many people, atheists, people who consider themselves morally upright. There are a lot of black folks that support this idea and question this idea that somehow God condoned slavery. Let me make it clear at the outset. God does not condone slavery, nor is there anything of that import in the scriptures to substantiate such a notion. And people confuse the difference between what God allows and permits versus what God decrees should be done. For example, I'll give you an example. Divorce. God says divorce is a sin, period. And it is. In spite of what all of you think, those of you who have had multiple divorces and marriages and whatnot, from God's perspective, we have to be honest with what the Word of God teaches. God hates divorce. Yet he allowed Moses, permitted Moses to give and grant certificates of divorce to the people because of their sin. Because of their sin. Not because he condoned it. God hated divorce then. He hates divorce now. His position on divorce as a sin is no different than it ever was, and is no different than how he feels about any sin, for that matter. So, because God allows it, does not give men a license to do it and to be morally absolved. So anyway, dealing with this issue of slavery, we always refer to Leviticus chapter 25, which is the common passage in verses 44 through 46 that is used for people to make the case that God condones slavery. However, it is unfortunate as to how many Christians are inept and unskillful at handling the Word of God and allow these lies about God to persist in the atmosphere. But let me read the passage. It says in verse 44 of Leviticus chapter 25, both thy bondmen and thy bondmaids, in other words, slaves, which you shall have, shall be of the heathen that are round about you, and of them you shall buy bondmen and bondmaids, slaves. Moreover, the children of the strangers that do sojourn among you, of them you buy, and of their animals, and of their families that are with you, which they begat in your hand, and they shall be your possession. And you shall take them as an inheritance for your children after you to inherit them for a possession. They shall be your bondmen forever. But over your brethren, the children of Israel, you shall not rule one over another with rigor. Now, generally speaking, what needs to be understood is that there were principally two types of people that found themselves in these positions. Three. First of all, they were all heathen. They were any heathen. Any heathen. This wasn't about race. This was about faith. Those who were amongst Israel and the Israelites, they were free from this situation of being made a bondman or a bondmaid. So everyone else who was not of the nation of Israel could be found as bondmen or bondwomen, slaves, to people of Israel. And again, this wasn't about race. This was about heathenism. Those who were outside the theocratic faith. those who did not subscribe to Jehovah as all of the world should. And God gave them mandates. He gave the Israelites mandates for how to handle these people that were legitimately their property. They could make property of people. This is exactly what the Word of God says. Can't run away from that. God did allow it, and God made a construct whereby they were to manage those people who were held under their captivity. But what needs also to be known is that this goes more toward employment rather than it does to forced labor. But generally speaking, forced labor came in a lot when they took captives. So, but again, not running away from this whole thing, but what I want to make sure you understand is that it wasn't something God condoned simply because he allowed it. There's a difference between what he allowed and what he permits. There's a big difference between his will of precept versus his will of decree. Just because God allows law, he creates laws to handle sin, doesn't mean he supports the sin that warrants the law that is intended to govern it and to manage it. So you see nothing here dealing with God, dealing with specifically with African Americans or Greeks or Ishmaelites or any other person. The